Hi, I'm Ian Griffiths, and this is a talk from the Building Business Applications in Silverlight series. In this talk, we're going to look at context menus and more generally, handling the right mouse button. So Silverlight 4 adds support for working with the right mouse button. Previously, when you right-clicked, all you would see was Silverlight's own context menu. So we get two new events in Silverlight. There's a mouse right button up and a mouse right button down event. You actually got to handle both of these if you want to do normal menu type handling, because traditionally things tend to happen on the mouse up event. It's when you let go of the mouse button that you see the context menu appear. However, if you only handle the mouse right button up, you'll never actually see the event. You only get sent the mouse right button up event if you handle the mouse button down event and mark it as handled. So typically we end up handling both. Now there's no context menu class built into Silverlight right now, so we actually have to do a certain amount of work to get a context menu to appear. We have to build it ourselves. So we've got to write the UI, we've got to build some visuals that look like we'd like the menu to appear. And by the way, be aware that this means the whole thing's going to be entirely within inside the bounds of the Silverlight pop-up, the Silverlight control. So like any pop-up, it'll be constrained to be within the borders of the region that Silverlight's rendering. You don't get to add a separate top-level window like you would do with a Windows menu. So you've got to determine how it looks. It's also, slightly more complicatedly, it's your job to decide when to make it go away again. So you have to detect when the user's clicked somewhere else inside of your application and get it to close. And one other thing to be aware of is that you will need your pop-up to be hosted somewhere inside the visual tree of your application. Technically, if you create a pop-up and just show it without ever hooking it into the visual tree, without making it a child of some element in your user interface, it appears to work. It will show the content even though you've not given it a parent. However, you'll find some things don't quite work right. For example, any controls in there might not get wired up to their templates correctly. So you can end up in a situation where, although the menu is visible, it does not actually respond properly to user input. So in practice, you're going to want to make sure that you found somewhere to host the pop-up when you show it so that it'll actually work correctly. And as I say, you'll also need to do some sort of top-level handling of mouse events to make sure that you make the thing go away again after you're done. Now, in the Silverlight toolkit, there is a context menu class that you can use. So it's only the core Silverlight SDK that doesn't have this feature. So if you add in the Silverlight toolkit to your project, then you can use the context menu that it provides. So let's look at handling of the new mouse button events in Silverlight. So I've created an empty project here, just an ordinary Silverlight application with nothing particularly interesting in the UI. So what I'm going to do is add a pop-up to this UI. So let's have a pop-up element. I'm going to call this, name equals my menu. And initially, I'm going to set the visibility to be collapsed so that we can't see it. And then inside of this, let's have a border. And I'm going to round off the edges because I can. Let's give it a black outline. And then inside of this, let's add a stack panel to hold a couple of buttons. So obviously right now if I run this, this is not going to appear, but I can arrange for this thing to become visible at the point at which I right-click on the UI. So let's add some handlers. I'm going to add the right-click handler to the root grid element, because this is going to fill the entire space of my Silverlight user interface. And significantly, the background is set. This is set by default by the Silverlight template. The reason you care about this is that Silverlight's mouse handling model only considers something to be visible to the mouse if it's actually been painted in. It makes a distinction between elements that are not painted and elements that are. So if you have a transparent element that's just simply not painting anything, you can't click on it. Painting a white background and explicitly solves that so we can handle events. So now I can wire up a mouse right button down event and also a mouse right button up event. So I'm going to go to the code behind and wire these things up. For the mouse right button down, all I'm going to do is take the event argument object and mark it as handled to say I am handling right clicks. So please send me the mouse right up event as well. I'll set this to handle true, to true as well, so that I can stop the context menu from appearing. So with this in place, nothing will happen, but I should stop getting the standard Silverlight context menu. So when I click, Now nothing is happening because I'm handling the right-click events. So the next thing for me to do is to make sure my pop-up actually appears. So I'm going to show the My Menu pop-up that I created when the user lets go of this item. So let's do that. MyMenu.visibility equals visibility dot visible. And I also need to make sure that it's open because pop-ups are initially not open. So I need to set the is open property to be true. So now, if I just minimize this a little bit, if I right-click, the item appears. I've got some layout issues. I probably need some padding around those buttons so that they don't overlap the edge of the border, but they are now visible. Problem is, if I click somewhere, it doesn't go away, and also, of course, the position of the things is not quite right. I'm going to solve both of these problems by wrapping the whole thing in a canvas for reasons that will become apparent once I wire it all together. So I'm going to have a canvas element. And this does two things for me. It's going to give me a way in which I can get precise control over the positioning of the pop-up, because Canvas gives me layout mechanisms to say exactly where I'd like things to go. Also, I can arrange for the canvas to be a thing that the user can click on to dismiss it. By putting the canvas at the top of the user interface, right now this will be above anything else in my UI, and I need to be careful to make sure any other UI elements came before the canvas so that it remains on top. But as long as it is on top, it can capture mouse clicks. Now, just to make it perfectly obvious what's happening, I'm going to give the canvas a non-empty background. So if I set the background to be, let's say, a semi-transparent shade of red, you can see the canvas is filling the whole available area. I'm actually going to move the visibility of this thing to be down here, make it collapsed, make the whole canvas initially collapsed. Not quite sure why it's still rendering that. It shouldn't be rendering it, but it won't do it at runtime, I hope. And I'm going to change the code so that we make the container visible and then make the menu open. So if I run this, I right-click, you can see my canvas has now become visible. I'm going to get rid of the color once I've got it all working, but I want to show you the mechanism I'm using here. So I'm showing the canvas, it's hosting the item. I can now use the canvas to position this. So let me find out where the mouse cursor is. So we're in a mouse handler, we can get the position that the mouse went down, and we can get that relative to any UI element we like. Let's get that relative to the menu container. And let's set the position. Let's set the left position of the menu itself to be mouse pause .x. In practice, you probably want to tweak these a little bit so it appears offset, but we'll just do this for now. Set top, my menu, comma, mouse pause .y. So I right-click, and now the thing is appearing underneath the mouse. So that's an improvement. And then finally, the reason I'm using a canvas to fill the entire area is so I've got a way of dismissing the menu when the user clicks anywhere else. So let's have a mouse left button down handler and also a mouse right button down handler. And in those, close the menu again, and also collapse the container. So if I run, I right-click, my menu appears. If I click somewhere else, it goes away again. If I right-click multiple times, notice that the thing goes away and comes back. So what's happening there is on the right, on the mouse down, I'm blowing away the menu and the container. I'm not actually marking that event as handled though. So the event will bubble up and then the root grid level handling will carry on as before, and so the menu reappears when I let go. So I've got the kind of behavior I want. And now the final thing I can do is make that canvas a lot less distracting by taking the background down. It needs to be present so I can actually get the mouse clicks, but I'll just make it transparent. So by painting it transparent, it won't be visible to the human eye, but it will be visible to the mouse handling. And now, as I right-click, the item appears. As I click somewhere else, it dismisses it. So, by handling the mouse up and mouse down events for the right mouse button, I'm able to customize what appears. And you can do anything you like here. I kind of crafted together a very simple menu type structure. You could use anything you like there, though. It doesn't have to be a context menu. The bottom line is we have the right mouse button events, and we can handle them, and we can do whatever we like.